This kid is like riding on the hood of the bus, like flipping off the whole school bus as they pass by. In 10 or 12 years on the school bus as a kid, a lot of funny things happen, and these are 3 funny things that happened to me when I was riding a school bus. The first of which happened early one morning in the fall. Now, I lived further out in the country than the other country kids that I lived with, so I was one of the first kids on the school bus in the morning, and the bus came even long before sun even came up. It was not to sound like somebody's granddad, but we had to walk a mile down a dirt road in the dark, wait on the side of the highway for the bus to come along. And I was probably, I don't know, ninth grade, maybe early 10th grade before I had a license, something like that. So I'm one of the older kids on the bus, and we sit in the back, and the younger kids get in the front. There's sort of that hierarchy of, power struggle and whatnot. So I'm in the back with the other older kids, and on this particular morning, we had a substitute bus driver. We only had the same substitute bus driver anytime our normal bus driver, Linda, was not in. We had this substitute called Diane. We always liked it when Diane was a bus driver because Diane got flustered easily. She startled easily, and she didn't really rule with the iron fist that Linda did on the bus. So we could generally get away with things that we could not normally get away with when Linda was at the wheel. So this particular morning, Diane's driving rather nervously, and we're all in the back trying to think of what would be a funny thing to do to Diane today. Me being a early student of physics, I guess, I had the bright idea, hey, wouldn't it be funny if all of us got on one side of the bus, and then right when we get to this, there was this one particular curve that, you topped the hill, and if you didn't know the road real well, it was kind of a sharp turn to the right, and there was just fields around, nothing big to hit or anything like that. Wouldn't it be funny if right in that turn we all jump from one side of the bus to the other side of the bus? It'll make the bus wiggle and she'll be startled. Ha ha. So it becomes this game. Again, it's dark. The sun's not even up yet. So this game, we're passing, to the seat to the next, and we're collecting kids. The bus is pretty full at this point. There's probably, I don't remember how many kids fit on a school bus. I don't know, 40, 50, 45 kids, whatever. So, we pass this little whisper down to the bus, so everybody starts slowly creeping over to the right side of the bus. And there's a few holdouts, of course, but for the most part, we get about 45 kids have all snuck to the right side of the school bus. And there's, 5, 6 kids to a seat, and we're all timing it to right when we get to this one curve. So sure enough, Diane's driving along, and, she's driving the bus, and she tops the hill, and of course she sees the curve, and it surprises her, and she kind of stabs the brakes and turns into it. And right at that moment, we yell, now, and everybody jumps to one side of the bus. When we planned this out, it was going to be this really funny, weight transfer, the bus will wiggle, and we'll all laugh. But what really happened was that 45 kids down from kindergarten up to high school, let's say there's an average of 100 pounds per kid. And there was about 45 kids. That's about 4,500 pounds jumping from one side of the bus to the other, which functionally equivalent was like getting broadsided by a Ford Explorer. So the swerve that we were all expecting was much more dramatic. The bus radically leaned out to the left in this turn, which of course made it cross the center line. Diane overcorrects the bus to the right, which of course then sloshes us all back into the aisle. We trying to get to our feet. She overcorrects. Now you've got 4,500 pounds of kids now staggering between the aisle of the bus, which is just amplifying this increasing oscillation. And finally, just so out of control, Diane's doing these crazy tank slappers in the school bus, and we go right into a ditch. Not a big ditch, just enough to get the bus stuck. But the bus kind of, goes off into the right, kind of plows into the ditch, and we're all falling in the floor. And, of course, Diane's terrified. She's worried if we're all okay. Of course, everybody's okay. But we now feel terrible because we actually caused a bus crash. A few of the older kids, we were old enough to realize at this point that, Diane might lose her job over this. So we just feel terrible now. But at the moment, though, we're all stuck in a school bus. It's leaning at a somewhat precarious angle. The bus was in the ditch enough that the little accordion door thing didn't really seem like a good idea to open it. So, we had to open the back door and go out the back way, which was pretty exciting. So now, though, rather than playing a funny joke on Diane, it's now a bitterly cold morning in North Georgia, and there's 45 school kids standing in a yard, freezing our butts off, waiting for the sun to come up, figuring out what's going to happen next. We get to school late. Everybody misses their first class, which was kind of fun. And then, and Diane didn't lose her job. She was our substitute several other times, but she always slowed down before that turn. So the second funny thing that happened with the school bus happened when I actually got to drive the school bus. Where I lived out in the country, I was like the last house on the bus route, and at the top of the road I lived on lived my bus driver. Now, I think in the city, the buses all go back to some kind of fence or corral or something like that. But out in the country, the bus drivers just took the bus home. It was like their daily driver. It stayed at their house. If you've ever seen South Park, Linda was the prototype for the bus driver on South Park. She was a very big, very strong lady. She usually had the sponge rollers in. She had this gravelly voice, and she would yell at you for anything. She ruled that school bus like an iron fist, and we were all terrified of Linda. But Linda was a good bus driver, and she knew her route, and she was a great driver, but we were all just terrified of her, and she would not hesitate to put the law down. I had seen her more than once literally put kids off on the side of the highway and just drive off and leave them. But again, this is the late 70s, early 80s. You could do that kind of stuff back then, but she would kick them off the school bus, or God help you, if you got to the railroad tracks and she yelled quiet and you kept talking, that bus was in park and she would come back and make you wish you had not kept talking. But Linda had a son named Shane. And on weekends and after school, Shane and I were friends and we would play, and we became friends in like first grade. So I am 6 years old. Shane's 7 years old. Shane had repeated the first grade, so he was older than me by a bit. And being farm kids, we were all just allowed to do things that most kids in the city, I guess, didn't get allowed to do. Now, we didn't have movie theaters or bowling alleys or cable TV, all the fun stuff a lot of y'all had, but we got to ride motorcycles and drive trucks and ride horses. And in Shane's particular case, he was allowed to drive their farm truck, not only around on the farm like the rest of us were allowed to drive on our farm trucks, but he was allowed to get out on the road. We didn't get to go far, and we were allowed to drive their truck around their farm, but around lunchtime, we were allowed to get out on this one little country road, go about a half mile down the road to his grandmother's house, and she would always make us lunch or sandwiches or something like that. So, Shane and I both had a fair amount of driving experience, even being a first grader and what should be a second grader. So by the time we were in like fourth grade, we were pretty handy behind the wheel. I'd learned to drive when I was 8 on my granddad's runway. We could both drive cars, all this kind of stuff. So we felt pretty confident. So one day, Linda and her husband had decided to go over to Alabama to get some kind of farm part or something like that. Her husband was a farmer. She drove the bus, and they left us at home for the day. And after driving go-karts and dirt bikes and random things around their farm all these years, we decided it'd be fun to drive the school bus. So here we are, a 10-year-old and 11-year-old. And again, we knew how to drive. So we get the keys, we crank the bus up, and we proceed to drive the bus around their farm. We're taking turns driving through the yard, going around the field roads, and we're not doing anything stupid in it, but we're driving the school bus. Of course, we're little, so we're just driving up there, doing the door, making the little stop line thing flip out, flipping the lights off and on. We're having a big time. We know the Linda's going to be gone for at least several hours. We got plenty of time. So we're trading back and forth. And during one of these driver switches, kind of like the cannonball would be 30 years later, during one of these driving switches, I get out behind the wheel. I get in the first seat. Shane gets in the wheel. And I guess he didn't realize how close I was to the edge of the garden when we switched out. So he gets in the bus and proceeds to back up and just sunk the back of the bus right into the garden. Now we're in trouble. This has turned into some Ferris Bueller type of thing. Now we've got to get this bus out of the garden before Linda comes home. So we're, getting the gears lacking, but it's not going. We're throwing mud everywhere. Shane knew how to drive their tractor. So there comes the right idea. So we run up to the barn, we get the tractor, we get all the little chains and things we find. I'm now, in retrospect, thinking of the scene as Linda saw it as she returned back from Alabama. She pulls into their yard. The school bus is obviously missing. Warning sign number 1. But fortunately for her, right past where she was normally looking to see the school bus, about a quarter mile down the slope, there is the school bus in the garden. Shane's behind the wheel of the tractor. I'm behind the wheel of the school bus. Rooster tails of mud shooting up behind the school bus. The tractor is not making any dent on the school bus. Front wheels are bobbing up and down. We've just got logging chains hooked to everything we could hook it to at the front of the school bus in a desperate attempt to get the school bus out of the yard. Didn't happen. Linda comes storming down there, and her husband was a smaller, quieter guy, but He's not saying a whole lot, but Linda's coming down that hill with the sponge rollers and the tank top, and we just realized that we had now died so young in our early lives. So, we get drug off the bus. Linda starts just spanking both of us, just backhanded, forehanded. She sends her husband off to call my mom. By the time my mom gets there, Linda's arm's numbed. My mom taps her out. My mom takes over beating us. We get drug off to the house. Of course, her husband, as an adult, managed to get the bus out of the garden. I got grounded for I don't know how long, but that next Monday morning, though, right back there on the school bus, knowing that I had gotten to drive the school bus. But the most amazing thing that I ever saw on a school bus, maybe one of the most amazing things I ever saw in my life on a vehicle, happened on a school bus one day. Now, this is not the school bus with Linda or Diane. This was the school bus that went to my grandmother's house, and I stayed with my grandparents a lot, and sometimes I would take that school bus to my grandmother's house. Now, that bus had been my bus route when I was a real little kid, and I remember the bus driver's son, and I can't remember her name or his name, but he was a bad kid. Now, this is 40 years ago. This kid, I'm in like kindergarten, first grade. This kid was in high school. He is probably somewhere in some sort of Hannibal Lecter clear plexiglass prison cell somewhere, because this kid was just bad. I remembered as like a kindergartner, like he pulled a knife on me one time on the bus because I wouldn't give up the window seat he wanted. Another time, I remember seeing him with a brown paper lunch bag showing a handgun to some other kids on the bus. And he was just always getting in fights and taking your lunch money and bullying people, and he was just a bad kid. So this is several years later. We've now moved elsewhere in the county. I'm on a different bus, but I did on occasion still ride that bus out to my grandmother's house. And one of these days, I'm on the bus, and this kid who's now well into high school, he is sitting up front in the seat right behind his mom, and he has gotten expelled from school for something. And she is just chewing him out, just driving the bus, yelling at him over her shoulder about how he's going to get grounded and she's going to take his car. About this time, we're on this long kind of straight stretch of highway. A car comes blowing up behind the school bus, like honking its horn. Now and again, I'm 4th, 5th grade. I don't remember what kind of car this was, but this would have been like 1982, 83. Let's just say it's some kind of early 70s muscle car, Chevelle, something like that. I don't really remember. Car's on the tail of the school bus, honking the horn. The son, who was sitting there, being just yelled at by his mother about how he's never going to see the light of day again, and they're going to nail his door of his bedroom shut and just never let him see out. He jumps up, says something awful to his mother, runs down the aisle of the bus. Now, flings open the back door of the school bus, which of course the alarm goes off and everything. Flings open the back door of the school bus, turns over his shoulder, shouts one more obscene thing to his mother, and jumps out of the school bus onto the hood of that car. Like stuntman style, just onto the hood, kind of grabs the cowling. The guy in the car proceeds to just punch it. This glorious V8 sound as this shell passes the school bus. And this kid is riding on the hood of the bus, flipping off the whole school bus as they pass by, and they proceed to disappear off into the distance. Now, this was the most amazing thing 4th grade me had ever seen. And by the next day, this was the talk of the whole school system that this happened. Now, I got to see it, but the kids that didn't even ride that school bus claimed they saw it. Everybody wanted to be in on the action. I was just some dorky kid sitting in the middle seats, and I had nothing to do with the situation other than sort of witnessing it from the wrong side of the school bus. But that was the most amazing thing I've ever seen happen. Maybe not even just in life, but definitely on a school bus.
Shopping for insurance can be an absolute nightmare, but it doesn't have to be thanks to Policy Genius. They're our sponsor for this month at VINwiki, and you can visit them at the link in the description below. You tell them a little bit about yourself, a little bit about your property, and they find the best deal by shopping amongst all the major carriers at the same time. In fact, you can bundle things like homeowners insurance and auto insurance, and the average user that bundles both of those things saves about $1,100 a year. So be sure to check them out and thank them for their support of VINwiki.